101, some Gen Z Politics 101 with my good friend and student and intern and everything else. We will have Miss Kalia Tanner, who is the class of 20. You hear me? 1996. That's crazy. The class of 2025. Yeah, at Dillard University, political science major. And greetings and welcome. How you been?
Pretty good. How have you been, Dr. Clark?
Oh, great! It's outstanding. You've been on the program a number of times, and you also work with us and do some great things with us. And this is your last sojourn on the program, indeed, as a student. But let's do this for me. I want you to talk to us about what you think are some current issues which are important. But the most important thing I want to talk about is to look at Gen Z and see what is the motivator for Gen Z and political participation, and why is it that Gen Z is the way it is, and I say the way it is political. I want you to give us your perception of Gen Z at this point in terms of the politics on the federal level. Yes.
I think my generation is I would say the theme for my generation is that we're trying to break generational curses. I think we're a forward thinking generation, and that applies to the way we think and process politics. So I think we're trying to get out of old non like bipartisan politics and trying to really find that middle ground and push for change in the ways that we want to see. I think we kind of see the errors in the ways of the past and what has and hasn't worked in the systems that we've had for so long. And so I think Gen Z is ready to kind of like break the mold and start to try some new things
And,
politically.
and you're absolutely correct, because I've been in the game for quite some time as a professor, and I've seen different generations move and different approaches toward politics, and the approaches tend to change in terms of political subcultures. They change in terms of regions of the country. They also change in terms of generations. And to talk about this particular generation, where it's headed and what it wants to do, um, some of the issues that Gen Z tends to be, uh, most importantly, they tend to be a little more liberal
Hmm.
than previous generations, in particular the baby boomers, the Generation X, and others. They tend to be quite more liberal, should I say.
Hmm.
And also in terms of females and women versus males, we find that women tend to be more liberal
Hmm.
in terms of Generation Z, and than the male counterparts. And I'm thinking to some extent that we find that those who are involved in college, who are college trained, college educated, tend to have more of a liberal basis as well. But in terms of the liberal conservative approach, um, how do you see the liberalism within your generation, this generation? Yes, please.
Well, I think in general, it's kind of like a known fact that people become more conservative as they get older. So I think it's important to remember that Gen Z is obviously still very young, and so it makes sense for us to be more liberal leaning. But also, I think we're taking liberalism to like the next level, because a big critique of the Democratic Party right now specifically is that it's too focused on trying to be there for everyone, that it doesn't have a strong message, and it doesn't like it's scared to be too extreme.
Yes.
And so I think Gen Z is ready to take that Democratic Party to the extreme so that we're able to put up a meaningful fight against our conservative counterparts, so we don't see outcomes like the recent presidential election and even like the congressional elections. um, Liberals are behind, not in all three branches of government. We're outweighed right now. So I think with Gen Z having a more extreme approach to it, we'll be able to kind of meet the conservatives where they're at and give them a run for their money.
I'm glad that you said that, and I'm glad actually that you did mention the most recent presidential election, because now it is something that we always say in political science, but as a student of politics, but we all know this period that elections do have consequences, and right now the Democratic Party itself is doing an autopsy in terms of what went wrong and what happened and how did they lose in terms of the Kamala Harris presidency, a nomination, should I say? And so, in your view, uh, and through your academic experience, what do you think went wrong in that national election with the election and with the presidential election? And I say, in your view, what went wrong? When you lose,
Hmm.
you lose, and
Yeah.
so definitely it's wrong then. So when you win, you're okay, but when you lose, what brought about the failure?
So first, I would like to preface by saying that I think the main reason Kamala lost the election is due to sexism and racism.
Okay.
But obviously, she was an overqualified candidate. So from like a PR perspective and just like a campaign perspective, I think where she went wrong is just I think she didn't go after like she didn't broaden her horizons enough in her campaign. She didn't go after the niche communities and try to secure those votes. She just promoted mainly to the people that were already going to vote for her. She promoted to black people, she promoted to young people, she promoted to women, and she probably already had most of those votes in her back pocket. I think she needed to focus on shifting towards highlighting the policies that she plans to implement that would have impacted some of those swing votes or some of those swing states, people that were more likely to have the power to sway the election.
I see what you're saying. So you wanted her to expand the base
Hmm.
in the final analysis, and in the expansion of that base, what are some initiatives that you think that the Democratic Party itself now when they see that they need to attack who? Because we already know who's part of the Democratic Party base to some extent,
Hmm.
but they've lost some of the base in terms of white, male, working class, and just
Hmm.
the white working class community. Democratic Party now is they've lost a lot of that. So in the expansion of the base, what do you think that the Democratic Party should do?
I think the Democratic Party should focus on um I think they should focus on targeting those swing states and those swing votes, people that fall in those in between demographics, because that that is the group. Those are the groups that are ultimately going to sway elections, sway anything that they're trying to get passed in Congress, in the Senate. We need those swing votes. So I think the Democratic Party needs to, instead of just being, obviously it's okay to want to advocate for like human rights for everyone, but instead of making the face of the party be like, oh, we're for everybody, everybody's welcome, they need to like hammer down some basic principles that we stand for and just drill those down. Because in like our promotion, in speeches, in our legislation, in just everything, we need to make that those things the face of the party, because the Republicans party makes where they stand and what their politics are very clear. It's not, they make it clear that it's not for everyone. So we need to like, the Democratic Party needs to have that same clarity in order to have that same strength and force behind it.
Well, in the Democratic Party, you find you have the progressive wing,
Mhm.
which is highly supportive of the LGBT community and all the other et cetera that go along with it, and then you also have more moderate people within the party itself who not necessarily interested in what some may perceive as to be the cultural issues, but more interested in hardcore fiscal conservative issues,
Mhm.
and so then. Can there be a medium within that big tent within the party? And I say those are wings, uh, those are elements there that I think can they find harmony? Do you think?
I think, yeah, I think there's always room to find some common ground, but I think the the messaging just needs to be stronger and it needs to be more direct. Like we need more clarity in the messaging, because I think a lot of people just default to Democrat and they don't even realize truly or fully what they're aligning themselves with. And that's why you see people becoming more conservative as they get older and they learn more about politics and have more time to dedicate to educating themselves on that. So I think for the Democratic Party, it's not so much that we can't hold those same values of being a safe space for everyone and for the working class and for the LGBTQ community. Those are things that I very much believe and align myself with. But there's always a way to play the game, and when we have this like super nice face that we put on, it it falls short against the aggression that the Republicans come with in their
Now,
politics.
there's another dilemma that I think that many people face, and this is one that I'm always asked about, and that is when it comes to voter apathy and political participation. Uh, What do you account for voter apathy within Generation Z? And in terms of voting now it turn off in high stakes elections, but not always the case.
Hmm.
What is the motivator? Because you're a professional and you engage because you're in tune, you're highly involved with what's taking place. But for those individuals who are not in tune every day, who politics is not even a portion or part of their life, is a secondary at best issue in their life. What do you account for voter apathy, and how do you increase political participation among Gen Z and also African Americans?
Um, for voter apathy, I would say I want to start by saying in the civic engagement work I've done firsthand, I do not see a lot of voter apathy in my generation, specifically in my community at Dillard. And maybe that's because Dillard is an HBCU, so our students voter apathy is a privilege. Young black students don't have the privilege to not know what's happening politically because it's going to affect us when we have a bigoted president in office literally trying to strip us of our basic rights. So when I was working on campus and trying to encourage students to vote, it was never hard to get their attention or get them to care because they already did care. It was just a matter of filling in that knowledge gap. So, in terms of minimizing voter apathy among my generation, although I don't think it's that big of an issue, I think the best way to attack voter apathy is to like inform people because when I was looking through Project 2025 and seeing the stuff that they were planning on implementing, there was a lot of like elements of it that stood out to me that I was like, if somebody who claims they don't care about voting or they don't think the election's important, if I was to tell them that this is what's going to happen if this person wins, then they would care. Like in Project 2025, it said that they were planning to like reel back the Civil Rights Act, things like that. Social Security was being put at risk. So when I do face people with voter apathy, I try to inform them about a policy that I know would affect them directly, and that usually like gives them that wake up call to care because I saw a quote somewhere. It was like, if you don't care about politics, or you don't, if you say you don't do politics, politics are going to do you. And it's so true because you can sit back and say you don't care all you want, but when these policies are put into effect, your life is going to be affected. So yeah, I think informing people and educating them is the best way to counteract voter apathy.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned your Dillard experience, what you do, and and just talk about some of the activities that you do at Dillard University in political science, and because I know you're part of a number of organizations and you're highly involved and highly active. But tell us a part of what you do in some of the organizations that you are involved in terms of the political
So
science arena. Yes.
my main extracurriculars at Dillard have consisted of civic engagement work. So I serve as the president of Andrew Goodman Foundation and I serve as a second year democracy fellow. And so in both of these positions, we organize events to inform students and educate them about what's happening politically and just help mobilize students to vote. So obviously, last semester was a big semester for us with the presidential election and all. We we hosted a presidential debate watch party, a presidential election watch party. We marched to the polls on election day. We did tabling throughout the whole semester, helping students get registered to vote and things like that.
Oh, that's outstanding. And when you approach students, what do you say to them?
Well, we kind of
Yes.
have let students come to us type of
Okay.
approach, but we position ourselves where we're like right in their face, so they're likely to stop by.
When you say position, you mean physically and strategically.
Yes,
Yes, you locate
literally,
in the
like
union.
in the under the cafeteria where
Yes.
students are always walking by because we got to eat. So I think positioning ourselves and making sure we are strategic about the times that we do that. Like we would go there during times where we know the cafeteria would be busy, there would be a lot of foot traffic. And like I said, in my experience at Dillard, the students were eager to learn how to vote. The students were eager to learn what was happening politically and understand the policies that were being implemented, especially because we knew how big of an election this was and what the risks were if it didn't go in our favor. So there wasn't much voter apathy, and it was just very exciting for me as the student doing the work because I didn't have to like pull teeth to get students to engage with us. They were already excited to do it.
And I'm glad you said that because one thing that I discovered over the years is that, and also recognize, and that is that at HBCUs in general and Dillard University in particular, that's what we do.
Hmm.
And that's part of what the mandate of individuals who come to Dillard expect. and to these schools and these private black institutions come to Dillard and come and to expect. But it's also what we do, period. Because to engage in the community, to participate in the community, and to be highly involved, and it's also part of the pillars at the university in terms of what we expect in terms of the outcomes that we expect our students to have. Uh, Tell us about your journey to Dillard, because I know you're from Sacramento, California, and you're from the West Coast, and then it's an interesting ride from the West Coast to the Gulf Coast. And
Yeah.
so, tell us about your experience in terms of the movement and what brought you to our community, to this community. Yes.
So, what brought me to Dillard is just growing up going to a lot of predominantly white institutions. By my sophomore year of high school, I just knew that I wanted to go to an HBCU. But I was working so hard in high school that I wanted to go to an HBCU that was, a bit illustrious, that everybody couldn't just get into, that I could have got into without even trying in high school. So, I looked up like prestigious HBCUs, and Dillard was among the list of HBCUs that came up. And I also didn't want to go to an HBCU that was like in the middle of nowhere. I didn't want to be like in a random place in the South where I felt like if I stepped foot off campus, like I was going to get hate crimed. So, Dillard, what led me to Dillard was location, prestige, and honestly, God, because my number one school was Howard, but I didn't get in there. And I think it was because if I got in, I would have went there, but I wasn't meant to go there. I was meant to go to Dillard. And my experience, I've just fallen in love with the culture of New Orleans, and it will always hold a special. Although I'm excited to go back home, I can't wait. It will always hold a special place in my heart because I really grew up a lot here. It just developed me in ways I never would have imagined. So I will always just have a grateful space for Dillard in New Orleans.
Now, and your sister is a graduate of Howard University.
Yes, she
And
is.
my alumni, yes, and so we've got to say that for the record, and because it's important. But we understand that, and you see differences. How do you look at the nomenclature, in particular the political culture in California versus the political culture here in Louisiana, or in particular Sacramento versus New Orleans?
Well, for one, I would say there's definitely, I felt the big difference of living in a blue state versus living in a red state. So that's one of the main differences. I feel like here, like, there's constantly elections happening where it's like literally human rights are being threatened, and it's just like casually happening. But one thing I will say is New Orleans in particular is a very blue city, one, and two, it's a very politically engaged city. I think a lot of the citizens of New Orleans are very like interested in what's happening politically. They take pride in the city council members and the mayor and really hold their politicians accountable in that way. Whereas, at least in my experience in Sacramento, when I go back with a degree and start working, I'll probably have a better idea of what the political landscape is currently. But I didn't see that much like drive behind the political scene from like your daily citizens in Sacramento. It was more so like the politicians care, and like maybe the middle class people or the educated people care, but like just the day-to-day person you're running into isn't really worried about who's running for city council or who our mayor is. Whereas like in New Orleans, Mayor Cantrell is kind of like a celebrity.
Yeah, it's a different world,
Hmm.
and in the South itself, they tend to feed off of politics because there's so much power that, in particular, mayors have. And the mayor of New Orleans is a very powerful person.
Yeah.
The governor of Louisiana is a very powerful person, and so and in southern cities in particular like this, they tend to be very powerful entities within themselves,
Hmm.
and we recognize that. What issues do you see for your own self? What you say are some predominant issues that you should pay attention to. Generation Z should pay attention to, but in particular that you find to be most important political issues.
Um, for my generation specifically, I feel like right now we have an administration that's trying to push a very like work to live type of mentality even more so, which the US is already under that type of mentality with just our capitalist system, but I feel like the conservatives are trying to push it further, and they actually have the means to do so with the political climate right now. So I feel like we should, as Gen Z, just be very aware of that, because I know my generation does not want to live that way. We want to be able to relax, have financial security. I think we should pay attention to what's happening economically. I know a lot of people struggle to understand the economy, but we're like on the brink of a recession, and so as we're all like trying to start our careers and take like steps into adulthood, maybe get our own apartments, get cars, things like that, we need to be aware of what's happening economically so that we can step into adulthood being responsible with our money and not being in debt or having bad credit and things like that.
Oh, and I'm glad you mentioned the economic aspect of it. And you are right in you're facing something that all Americans are facing right now, and that is the nature of these tariffs.
Hmm.
And I just like to get your perception of terrorists and the impact you think will have on not only America but your generation itself.
Yeah, I think the inflation is just going to be insane.
You see
Um,
it coming, yes.
yeah, I think the inflation is just going to be crazy. My advice is to start saving up now. But I think the bigger effect it would have is just on the world political scale. We're severing ties with people that have been our longtime allies, and that could change a lot of politics for the U.S. Because if we don't have the same balance we did with like being on good terms with Canada, being good friends with France, having a solid rapport with China, then it could really flip the scales against our favor. So I think our president should be a little more conscious of the way all these tricky things balance in the world on the world scale, because although America is a very powerful nation, we do need like support from other countries in order to keep things running how they have been.
And interesting enough, you come from a state and a city where immigration is highly important
Hmm.
and a very diverse community. What's your perception of immigration as it stands within this current administration?
I'm completely against the way this current administration is handling immigration. I think there's been a lot of human rights violations and a lot of talk of human rights violations that I just personally cannot stand behind. I think immigrants help stimulate our economy, but more so than that, they are people and they deserve to be treated as such. Um,
And
and
illegal aliens as well, yes.
yeah, they deserve to be treated as such. And we have a president that's trying to like literally take away rights that are enshrined in our constitution, like trying to take away stuff like birthright citizenship. So I think this is another reason. This goes back to my point earlier about the Democrats needing to bring down the hammer harder when you have such a president that's coming with such aggressive action from his side of the party scales. I think we have to like match that energy. We have to match that aggression in order to truly be successful in sustaining those rights that these people
Do
deserve.
you think the Democrats have the capacity to match it?
I'm honestly not sure right now what the Democrats have the
Because it's a
capacity
question of
to do.
capacity as well. Sometimes we say it should happen, but issues become the question of capacity, and then many of the Republicans legislators are just falling in line. You know,
Yeah.
they're just acting as robots.
I think
And
there's some
yes,
Democrats that have the capacity, but I don't know if the group as a whole is strong enough because we just saw how the whole presidential election went down. But the Democrats have to be willing to fight for these rights the same way the Republicans were willing to fight for their bigotry. Um, so yeah, we need more Democrats doing things like Cory Booker, like Jasmine Crockett. We need more of our representatives not afraid to be on the front lines and fight for us in that way because that's literally what their job is.
right. And I will also throw in the mix our current congressman from this area, Congressman Troy Carter, who's on the
Mm-hmm.
front line doing absolutely fantastic job in Washington. Now, in terms of what you do and what you see, and I know we have a few minutes remaining, but I just want to get an idea of uh, two questions. But one is one in particular is about your perception of the future. Do you see? Because you mentioned racism and sexism. Do you see a candidate of color and female running again in the future about with either party and being successful for the presidency
I see
in the near future? Should I say?
I see hmm I don't okay, answering realistically with where the state of our democracy seems to be right now and just the state of mind people seem to be in, I don't think America is ready to truly elect a woman as president, let alone a woman of color. However, see that from I don't see the women, powerful women in politics, letting that stop them from trying. The same way we saw Kamala try, and she ran a great campaign and she got close, but in this instance, unfortunately, like the bigoted side won. But I do see like someone being not scared to try again. However, I think right now it's just because of the racism and the sexism that exists so strongly. I think it is going to take like a white man, because a Democrat white man, to outweigh what the conservatives are pushing right now, because clearly America is not progressive enough, in a progressive enough state of mind, to elect a woman, because they didn't even elect a white woman in 2016. So and then they didn't elect a woman of color, but then when it was Trump against another white man, the white man won. So I think it's gonna take like another white man, maybe like Gavin Newsom or something like that, to help us break out of this Trump administration. And then after that, I think maybe the US will be more ready to receive a person of color or a woman or both.
And my position has always been is that America may not be ready, but you got to make them ready.
Right.
They may not be ready for Jim Brown, but Jim Brown's in the game. And that's always been my perception. They may not be ready for Kobe or whoever it may be, or Shaq, or they're in the game. But so once you're in the game, you change the equation. In the remaining minute or so that we do have, I want you to tell us about your statement for those students who are coming behind you in political science at the university, what they should expect, and your aspiration for them. Yes.
I wish you all the best coming behind me. I know you guys are so bright and you're going to do great things. I would say my advice is to just make sure you immerse yourself in the conversations we're having in class, immerse yourself in the debates, because even though we don't get graded for those things, having those intellectual conversations really does just help stimulate your mind and help you grow, and just grow in your political thinking and your ways of like evaluating what's happening in the world around us. And I would just encourage you to build really strong relationships with Dr. Clark and Dr. Condell. Those are our main two political science professors at Dillard. We know that we bicker a lot with them. It's all in good love, though. But honestly, like, they are our biggest supporters. And when we do have our little debates or bickers, I think it really just forces us to critically think and be able to think like politicians, think like lawyers, and be able to support all of our points through and through.
And I'm glad you said that. And that's the key word is to develop critical thinking skills. So when you go to the next level, the graduate professional school and the law school, these other et cetera, it's the critical thinking that becomes important, and critical analysis, which becomes very, very important. And again, I want to thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to have you. Yes, indeed, Ms. Kalia Tanner is going to be part of the graduating class of 2025. And you can follow me on all platforms of social media. And as always, it's been a pleasure.